Methods in Psychology. In the discussion of psychology as a science, page 4, it was emphasized that the discovery of new knowledge about behavior is based on experiment and observation. Figure 1.2. Let us look more closely at the way psychologists go about making observations. Experimental methods. The basic ideas behind the experimental method are straightforward. Having formulated a testable hypothesis in terms of observable events, the experimenter 1. Changes or varies the events which are hypothesized to have an effect, 2. Keeps other conditions constant, and 3. Looks for an effect of the change or variation on the system under observation. Since psychology is the science of behavior, the psychologist looks for an effect of the experimental changes on behavior. This is simple enough, but to get a firmer grasp on the experimental method in psychology, we should examine it in greater detail. Variables. As the term implies, a variable is an event or condition which can have different values. Ideally, it is an event or condition which can be measured and which varies quantitatively. Variables may be either independent or dependent. An independent variable is a condition set selected by an experimenter to see whether it will have an effect on behavior. It might be a stimulus presented, a drug administered, a new method of training business managers, and so on. The dependent variable is the behavior of the person or animal in the experiment. A dependent variable in an experiment might be the response of a person to a stimulus, a change in behavior after the administration of a drug. Changes in managerial behavior after a new training program has been instituted, a score on a test, a verbal report about an event in the environment, and so on. The dependent variable is so called because its value depends, or may depend, on the value of the independent variable, the one independently chosen and directly manipulated by the experimenter. When, in doing experiments, hypotheses are formulated about the effect of one thing on another, the independent variable expected to produce changes in the dependent variable. Consider the following hypotheses, for instance, 1. The one enriching the environments of young children with special books and toys will increase their scores on intelligence tests. 2. Giving people training in how to meditate will improve their skill as tennis players. The environmental enrichment and the meditation training are the independent variables, while the changes in intelligence test scores and tennis skills, possible outcomes of differences in the independent variables, are the dependent variables. When you read accounts of psychological or other experiments, it is essential that you identify the independent and dependent variables. In graphing the results of an experiment, it is conventional in psychology to plot the values of the independent variable on the horizontal axis, or abscissa, and the values of the dependent variable on the vertical axis, or ordinate. In this way, we can see at a glance how the dependent variable of behavior is related to the values of the independent variable. Figure 1.3 controls. Another very important characteristic of the experimental method is control. In an experiment, it is important that only the specified independent variables be allowed to change. Factors other than the independent variable which might affect the dependent variable must be held constant. It would do no good to study the effects of varying an independent variable if, unknown to the experimenter, other factors also changed. In an experiment, we must control conditions which would give misleading results. It is literally true that an experiment does no better than its controls. Scientists must be very careful to control their experiments adequately.